He's talking about liberalism, and in the first paragraph, he's talking about that liberalism, you see, that has been waging a war against its detractors. And now it is slowly disappearing, or it is what you call disintegrating. Why? Because the votaries of liberalism, people who follow liberalism, they have turned insolent. They have turned insolent, and there are internal quarrels, you see, with people who are votaries, who are the followers of liberalism. And the second point he makes is that in present times, he says that democracy, you see, has become absurd. Democracy, you see, he points out, has become foolish. It has subsided. It has disintegrated into the world of absurd. You see, into the theater of the adverse. And then, with the coming of technology, what had happened was work. You see, work has been reduced, no doubt. But then it has become a drudgery. It has become a boredom. You see, the work that has been reduced. These are the main points that he makes in the first paragraph. You see, the first paragraph he's talking about, that is, there is a gap between what you call liberalism and the lived reality. You see, what we call liberalism and what we actually are following, he wants to point out that there is a gap. Okay. Now, in the second paragraph, he's talking about something a little different but related to what he called liberalism only. He says that today, you see, there is a mood of what you call disillusionment. People are in despair. And he points out one thing: the communists, the left wing, you see, the left wingers or the communists, you see, they are complaining about, you see, commercialization. The right wing people, they are complaining about narcissistic bullying, you see. And there is a general, you see, atmosphere of separation, a general atmosphere of separation, general atmosphere of isolation and selfishness. That is the point he wants to make up. And he says all this adds up to what? To the failure of liberalism. That is, he's basically, you see, questioning. And then he makes a point there. And the point is, in the second paragraph, he says that what is the essence of liberalism? The essence of liberalism is to release people from limitations, from constraints. There should be no individual constraints. Perfect democracy, perfect freedom. And he puts a point here, and he says that liberalists, you see, they can answer questions regarding responsibilities, regarding social ties, regarding individual responsibilities, individual rights, and so forth. Liberalism can also answer questions that have to do with the devolution of power, the sharing of power from the center to the other educational systems. That is, he points out, is liberalism. That's a problem with liberalism. He has talked about in the second paragraph, the disillusionment and so forth. In the third paragraph, you see, he says Mr. Denin's fixation on the essence of leads to the second big problem of his book. And what is that? The problem is, he says that liberalism cannot reform itself and address its internal problems. That is, in other words, to put it shortly, Mr. Denin, you see, he doesn't point out, or he fails to recognize the fact that if liberalism breaks down, it can reform itself and it can also take care of its own problems. He doesn't make what you call mention of this. And as an example, in the third paragraph, when he talks of this, he gives an example of the liberal traditions in the US. Liberalism, you see, reformed itself in the US in the 19th century. He has pointed that out. And in the last paragraph, he makes certain points. He says that liberalism, you see, the record of liberalism in the recent years has been very bad. That has been very dismal. Professor Dineen may be right, right? Professor Dineen may be right in so far that is, you see, the world has come to learn from what you call pre-modern notions of liberty as self-mastery and self-denial. The point is, he is also right to assert that the world has much to learn from the pre-modern notions of liberty and self-mastery and self-denial. And the enemy of liberalism is not atomization, it's not isolation or breaking down, you see, of things into bits. It is what you call greed. It's greed. So the next point that he makes is that the enemy of liberalism is not atomization, it is the greed. And he points that out here. Old-fashioned greed as members of the Davos elite pile their plates ever higher with perks and share options. So now the problem to this is not that you give up liberalism. It's not liberation from liberalism. Liberalism hasn't failed. Liberalism hasn't failed. It exists, but it has been distorted, you see. It has been used for the selfishness of people. Powerful people have used it for their own self ends, their own selfishness. So this is what you have in the entire passage. And now let's look into the questions. The author of the passage faults Dineen's conclusions for all of the following reasons, except. You see, you have the answer in paragraph number 4. In paragraph number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is the last paragraph. Its extreme pessimism about the future of liberalism today and prediction of an ultimate decline. Yes. It's repeated harking back to pre-modern notions of liberty. No. That is the answer. That is the exception. That is the answer. The answer is option 2. And you have that in last paragraph. He says here he is also right to assert that the world has much to learn from the pre-modern notions of liberty as self-mastery and self-denial. So he doesn't what you call fault Dineen for the conclusions by offering this reason. This is an exception. It's very narrow definition of liberalism limited to individual freedoms. No, uh, it's not that. He has used it to fault what you call his conclusion. It's failure to note historical instances in which the process of declining has managed to reverse itself. No. So the correct answer is number 2. Let's look at the next question. The author of the passage is likely to disagree with all of the following statements except. Yes. He would agree with statement, claim, he would disagree with this statement. Claims about liberalism disintegration are exaggerated and misunderstand its core feature. The author would disagree with this. Why? Because he is giving an argument, you see, uh, against the disintegration. Okay. Number 2, he says if we accept that liberalism is a dying ideal, we must work to find a viable substitute. The author, you see, disagrees with this statement. This statement, you see, is disagreeable to the author. Why? Because he doesn't say that it is a dying ideal, right? He doesn't say that. Liberalism was the dominant ideal in the past century, but it had to reform itself to remain so. Does he disagree with this? No. He might disagree with 1 and 2 and 4, but not with 3. So 3 is the correct option. Now let's come to the next question. The author of the passage refers to the Davos elite to illustrate his views on what? You can see for yourself. He talks about the Davos elite, you see, about their perks and their share options. And I think he has also made a mention somewhere about, you see, the Davos elite in a previous paragraph also. What is he illustrating? The hypocrisy of the liberal rich who profess to subscribe to liberal values while coming most of the wealth, while cornering most of the wealth, cornering most of the wealth. So number one is the correct option. That is why he is giving you what you call the instance of the Davos. You can find that in the last line of the first paragraph also. What better proof of this than the vision of 1,000 private planes whisking their occupants to Davos to discuss the question of creating a shared future in a fragmented world? The other three are incorrect because the way the debate around liberalism has been captured by the rich, no, that's not the answer. The unlikelihood of a return to the liberalism of the past. He makes use of other examples, you see, to illustrate this, not the Davos example. The fact that the rise in liberalism had led to a greater interest in shared futures. No. The next question is, all of the following statements are evidence of the decline of liberalism today, except one statement. Because in the first paragraph, he says democracy has degenerated into a theater of absurd. So that is an example, you see, of evidence, you see, of liberalism being getting disintegrated or degenerating, you see, the decline of liberalism, the gap between liberalism's claims itself and the lived reality. That again shows, you see, that there is some kind of problem. The creation of a business aristocracy, the use of vast companies. You can find all these three things in the first paragraph, but then he doesn't use one thing, right, to show the decline of liberalism, and that is number two. And technological advances are reducing ever more areas of work into meaningless um, tragedy. So number two is the correct answer. Next passage. In fact, this is a passage that is quite diverse, right? With a lot of examples and so forth. Actually, what he is talking about here is, you see, second-hand shopping. You see, second-hand shopping, how can it be useful and how can it be harmful? You see, he raises certain points. And he says, you see, at the beginning, shopping at local organizations and charities as alternative to fast fashion brands such as Primark and Boohoo in the name of saving our planet. And he makes an important statement here by saying that, uh, you see, these online shops may seem such consumers are intentionally contributing to an industry that uses more energy than the aviation industry does. Okay, he's talking about garments, and he says that there's a problem with the waste disposal of garments. That is what he takes up in the second paragraph. The second paragraph, he talks about the landfills, 300,000 of tons. You see, 300,000 tons of them, the waste of clothing, which is destructive to the planet, to the atmosphere. And how do we dispose of this waste? The third paragraph, he's talking about that we might perhaps go for second-hand shopping. And second-hand shopping might help us reduce waste, number one. And number two, he points out that there is an expansion in the second-hand shopping. Okay. But the point is, do countries like the Great Britain, you see, are they in favor of what you call buying second-hand clothing? That is the main thing. It's all right to talk about second-hand clothing and so forth, but then are they in favor of it? So in the third paragraph, where he talks about second-hand shopping, and then again he gives you a figure that it would save 449 million pounds of waste, you see, equivalent to whatever it is, equivalent to the weight of 1 million polar bears. That would save the waste, you see, if you go for second-hand shopping. But the point is, in the next paragraph, he says, is second-hand shopping actually effective? That is the point. Is it effective? Because there's another thing in the next paragraph, you see, he's talking about, in the last two paragraphs, he's talking about that older clothes lead to microfiber pollution. And if they lead to microfiber pollution, then it's going to be a difficult time for all of us. So he is not in favor, he is not, you see, advocating a particular kind, you see, of buying here. And of course, in the last paragraph, he says that one solution could possibly be, you see, buying high quality material, high quality garments, high quality, what do you call, clothing that would perhaps help, you see, reduce this waste. Now, let's come to the questions here. He says, based on the passage, we can infer that the opposite of fast fashion, slow fashion, would most likely refer to clothes that, yes, what would it refer to? When you're, he says that we can infer that the opposite of fast fashion, slow fashion, would most likely refer to clothes that, what kinds of clothes? Clothes that are of high quality and long lasting. That is the correct answer. Number two is the correct answer. Now let's look at the next question. He says, according to the author, companies like Thread UP have not caught on in the UK for all of the following reasons, except that they have not caught in the UK for all of the following reasons. That is, recycling is currently not financially attractive for luxury brands. Luxury brands want to maintain their brand image. Luxury brands do not like their product to be devalued. The British don't buy second-hand clothing. So all these four reasons you see he has given you, and the first three are incorrect. The answer is number four. The British don't buy second-hand clothing. That is the correct answer. Now let's come to the next question. The central idea of the passage would be undermined. We would be weakening the central idea of the passage if clothes were not thrown and burnt in landfills. No, Primark and Boohoo recycled their clothes for vintage stores. Customers bought all their clothes online. Second-hand stores sold only high-quality clothes. So if the argument is to be weakened, then number four is the answer there. And the last question on this passage is the act of thrifting. He has talked about thrifting, I think, in the third paragraph. Thrifting has increasingly become a trendy practice. Okay, London is home to many second-hand or more commonly vintage shops across the city from Worcester. So he says thrifting, as described in the passage, can be considered as ironic because it is anti-consumerist attitude. No, it offers luxury clothing at what you call cut rate prices. I don't think so. It's not cost effective. No. You see, it's ironic because it has created environmental problems, and that is the correct answer. Now we can move on to the next passage. In this passage, you have facts, history, and historians. We'll quickly go through the main points you see in this passage. We take the first paragraph where he talks about the positivists, and they say that history is a science and that facts are very important, and we look at the facts first and then conclude from those facts. The first point in the first paragraph. The second point he makes in the first paragraph is that facts are available. Facts are available. You have got to just choose the right facts. And he says there are hardcore facts. And besides hardcore facts, there are facts you see which may not be very much hardcore in the sense that they are what you call flexible facts. But then we can look into both of them. That's what he's talking about. In the second paragraph, he raises the question, what is the historical fact? Now, what does he mean by historical fact? In this paragraph, he wants to point out that historians should be accurate. You see, they should be exact about the chronological facts. What do you mean by about the chronological fact? That is when a particular battle was fought, and the dates you see should be exact. There should be no doubt and debate about it. And that's the job of the historian. And in order to ascertain his facts, you see, in order to get his facts right, the historian can make use of, you see, assisting sciences or auxiliary sciences like, you see, uh, archaeology, epigraphy, numismatics, chronology, and so forth to find out the right fact, the right time when a particular event or a battle occurred. That is the business of the historian. He can make use of the auxiliary services. And in the third paragraph, he points out that what is important, you see, what is basic is not the quality of the fact. The basic thing is how the historian approaches those facts. The historian's interpretation of the fact is basic. You see, facts are there. Those facts can be ascertained, but then how the historian, you see, treats those facts. He should be able to tell us, well, was that a major historical event or was it not? History, you see, cannot be entirely selective. And the last line he says, the belief in a hard core of historical facts existing objectively and independently of the interpretation of the historian is a preposterous fallacy, but one which is very hard to eradicate. Now, what does he mean by that? He means to say that, however, you see, objective the historian might try to be, his description of the facts will always somewhere be colored by his own feelings, you see. It is a fallacy to say that the historian is totally objective and he has just narrated the facts. He says this is not possible. You will find the feelings, the passions of the historian, you see, interfering with the narration of the facts. So that is the main point. Go through the questions, you see. Now look at this question. All of the following, if true, can weaken the passage's claim that facts do not speak for themselves. Yes, that is what the passage claims, that facts do not speak for themselves. It's the historian, you see, who is handling those facts. So all of the following can weaken the passage's claim that facts do not speak for themselves, except one point. And that, what is that point? That point is facts like truth can be relative. What is fact for person X may not be so for person Y. The answer to this is number 4. If you look at number 1, a fact by its very nature is objective and universal, irrespective of the context in which it is placed. The order in which a series of facts is presented does not have any bearing on the production of meaning. The truth value of a fact is independent of the historian who expresses it. So you can see for yourself that except for one, that facts like truth can be relative. What is fact for person X may not be so for person Y. So the correct answer is number 4. Now let's look at the next question. He says here, if the author of the passage were to write a book on the Battle of Hastings, along the lines of his or her own reasoning, the focus of the historical account would be on what? Yes. I mean, he has already talked about the Battle of Hastings, where when he was talking about, I think he made it in the passing or something. It was fought at Hastings or not, and so forth. So, what would be, you see, the focus of this author of the passage? Producing a detailed timeline of the various events, producing a nuanced interpretation by relying on the auxiliary sciences, denying historical facts from the relevant documents and inscriptions, exploring the socio-political and economic factors that led to the battle. That is the answer, number 4. Why did I say number 4 is the answer? Because the way the writer is talking about in the passage about historical facts, you see, a detailed timeline or chronology is something which is just unavoidable. I mean, that is very objective, giving the timeline, you see, that led to the battle. Giving a interpretation of the battle, you see, of using the by use of chronology, or what you call epigraphy or archaeology, you see, that again is something, you see, the writer has already talked about. Deriving historical facts from the relevant documents, and that is the job of the historian. The point is the kind of reasoning that he is using in the passage. If he were to write a book, you see, about the battle, then he would look into the socio-political and economic factors that led to the battle, because he is interpreting it according to what you should come out, you see, out of the battle, or what led to the battle, you see. the approach that he has, you see, is not only basic to the fact. No, that's not the approach. The approach is being inquisitive. What led to the battle? You see, that is the tone of the passage. So number 4 is the correct answer. The next question: all of the following describe the common sense view of history except. All of the following describe the common sense view of history. That is, real history can be found in ancient engravings and archival documents. History can be objective like the sciences if it's derived from the historical facts. Only the positivist methods can lead to credible historical knowledge. History is like a science, a selective system of cognitive orientations to reality. So that is the answer number 4. Because number 4 doesn't give you the common sense view of history, right? It is something different, making it a science, you see. So number 4 is the correct answer. Now let's look at the next question. He says here, according to the passage, which one of the following statements best describes the significance of archaeology for historians? You can see for yourself. Archaeology helps historians to carry out their primary duty. Now that is a vague answer. Primary duty. Archaeology helps historians to interpret historical facts. It's only for interpretation? No. Archaeology helps historians to locate the oldest civilization in history. Is that the only aim? No. Archaeology helps historians to ascertain factual accuracy. That is important. You see, factual accuracy. So, number 4 is the correct answer. So, now we can move on to the next passage. Is again a diverse passage, and it is about, you see, in short, it is about translation, dubbing of films and serials, and you see, on the Netflix, on the media, you see, that's what he's talking about. And he points out that Netflix offers dubbing in 34 languages and so forth. He has pointed out. And the second paragraph, he points out that Americans, you see, view uh, are fond of viewing dubbed films. You see, whether it's crime, mystery. Uh, but somehow he points out that in 2015, 75% of the Netflix content, original content, was American, but now it has reduced to half. That's what he points out. And in the third paragraph, he talks about what you call the universal appeal. You see that mystery, crime, turmoils, they are, you see, they have a what you call universal appeal. Uh, People are fond of watching such serials or films that have to do with mystery and crime and so forth. Now, the point is, in the next paragraph, in paragraph number 4, he says in Brussels and national capital, the prospect of Netflix as a cultural hegemon is seen as a threat. Cultural sovereignty is the watchword of European executives worried about that Americans will eat their lunch. So he is talking about Netflix and other things. You see in the fourth paragraph, the market, you see, that is working there. And he says here that in Los Angeles, cooking up ideas French people might like. Now Netflix has offices across Europe, but the big decisions are taken by American executives. So um, uh, that's all about. And the last paragraph, of course, is about, and again, you see, an irony of the European integration is that it is often American companies that facilitate Google Translate makes European newspapers comprehensible. So the contribution of America, you see, cannot be overlooked in this field. And then now Netflix and friends pump the same content into homes across the continent, making culture a cross-border endeavor too. And now you can understand what he says here. If Europeans are to share a currency, bail each other out in times of financial, and share vaccines in pandemic, then they need to have something in common, even if it's just binging on the same series, watching fictitious northern and southern Europeans tear each other apart 2000 years ago, beats doing so in reality. So now you can get an idea of what he's talking about, the influence of what he called the Americans on Netflix, and how Europe has been responding to it, and what has been the response of what you call the European viewers. That is all about in the entire passage. So let's come to this question. Based on the information provided in the passage, all of the following are true except only half of Netflix original programming in the EU is now produced in America. That is correct. National broadcasters dominate in the EU in terms of what you call total television viewing hours. That's also correct. Netflix has been able to transform itself into a truly European entity. No, that is the problem. That is incorrect. So that is the answer number three. Number three. And that is why you have the European politicians nervous. European television productions have the potential to become global hits. So number three is the correct answer. Based on the information provided in the passage, which one of the following hypothetical Netflix shows would be most successful with the audiences across the EU? I just pointed this out to you. The answer is a murder mystery drama set in North Africa and France, right? That would be something you see they would be fond of watching. That would be very popular. So number two is the correct answer. Now let's come to the next question. Which one of the following research findings would weaken the author's conclusion in the final paragraph? Weaken. Number one, research shows that Netflix has been gradually losing market share to other streaming television and service providers. No, it wouldn't weaken. Older women across EU enjoying watching romantic comedies. No, that wouldn't. What would weaken is research shows there is a wide variance in the popularity and viewing of Netflix shows across different EU countries. I mean, if you have this, you see, as a research finding, then it would weaken the author's conclusion in the final paragraph, right? And what is the final conclusion in the paragraph? He says that he's actually talking about the ironic situation, and he says that Google Translate makes European newspapers comprehensible. So the argument you see in the last one, conclusion you see would be weakened by number four. So number four is the correct answer. And the next question is, the author sees the rise of Netflix in Europe as what? A cultural threat? No. An entertainment gap? No. An economic threat? No. He sees that as a unifying force, bringing together what you call um, the European nations. So that is the correct answer. Now let's look at the uh, next question here, and this has to do with what you call fitting in the sentence. There's a sentence missing in the paragraph, and he has given you one, two, three, four options. You have to put this sentence you see in the correct slot. While doing so, in order to do so, what you should do is you must look into the context. You must look into what precedes this sentence when you put it somewhere and what follows this sentence. For instance, you were to put it in number one, for instance. Dualism was long held as the defining feature of developing countries in contrast to developed countries where frontier technologies and high productivity were assumed to prevail. At the core of development economics lies the idea of productive dualism, that poor countries. Now, you see, if you put this sentence in slot one, then it is followed by what you call at the core of development economics lies the idea of productive dualism, and he's talking about what you call the modern sector and advanced technologies, right? And traditional sector characterized by low productivity. So somehow dualism, this sentence would not fit into number one. Obviously, when he's talking about the idea of productive dualism, then you start with saying dualism was long held as a defining feature of developing countries. No. Now let us look at number slot 2. While this distinction, what distinction? Now, what is this distinction about? Suppose you put this sentence here: dualism was long held as the defining feature of developing countries in contrast to developed countries, where frontier technologies and high productivity were assumed to prevail. Now, this distinction can refer to what you call the contrast. So you can keep in mind that in number 2, we can adjust this sentence. Okay, number 2. So option 2 is the correct answer. You can put this sentence in option 2. If you look at number 3, a combination of forces have produced a widening gap between the winners and those left behind. Okay. And then you say dualism. So somehow it doesn't fit into the context. And if you put it in number 4, then you say as a result. So that cannot be a consequence if they are talking about dualism and the contrast. And you say high productivity and technology were to prevail. Now you can't say as a consequence, as a result of all these things, then the argument would be wrong. So the correct option is number 2. Now let's look at the next question. And probably much earlier, moving the documentation for kissing back 1000 years compared to what was acknowledged in the scientific community. Research has hypothesized that the earliest evidence of human lip kissing originated in a very specific geographical location in South Asia 3,500 years ago. 3,500 years ago. Now we got a very good clue here, and probably much earlier. That refers to time before 3,500 years ago, a greater length of time. So I think we can think of putting it here, but then let's wait. From there, okay, from there, where in specific geographical location in South Asia, it may have spread to other regions. Now, that is the problem. If you put it in number 1, if you look for option 1 and you say, well, I'll put it in number 1, then you cannot justify the use of there. Then what will there refer to? Here, of course, when you have from there refers to the geographical location in South Asia. So we cannot have it in number 1. Let's try now. From there, it may have spread to other regions simultaneously, accelerating the spread of the herpes simplex virus. 1. According to Trell, Spank, Arbol, and Dr. Sophie Lund Rasmussen, who in a new article in the journal Science draw on a range of written sources from the earliest Mesopotamian societies. Kissing was already established, well established practice 4,500 years ago in the Middle East. Okay, so, and probably much earlier. Okay, now you can put it here, and probably much earlier. I think you can put the sentence here, because here you don't have the idea of what you call some other uh, noun pronoun which refers to the previous sentence. But here, and probably much earlier, that is before 5,000 years ago, moving the documentation for kissing back 1,000 years compared to what was acknowledged in the scientific community. Okay, so number 2, you can have this. And then in ancient Mesopotamia, people wrote in cuneiform scripts on clay tablets, and many thousands of these clay. Now the matter is over to clay tablet. So you can't put in what you call this documentation for kissing. You have what you call the correct answer is number 1, and that is you must put the sentence in option 2. Now let's look at the next question here. You have to find out the sentence which is the odd one, and then you tell us which is that sentence. Okay. The banning of Northern Lights should be considered as a precursor to censoring books for moral, worldview, or religious reasons. Attempts to ban books are attempts to silence authors who have summoned immense courage in telling their stories. Now, he's talking about the banning of Northern Lights. Possibly, it could be a book, and in 2 he makes a general statement Now, the banning and challenging of books in the US has escalated to an unprecedented level. The widely acclaimed fantasy novel Northern Lions was banned in some parts of the US and was the second most challenged book in the US. The American Library Association documented an unparalleled number of reported book challenges in 2022, about 2,500 unique titles. So, this is about the book and the ban, about a particular book and banning. So a general statement like number two has no place here about the author having the courage to tell the story and that bans, you see, silence the authors. We don't require a sentence of that kind. So the answer is number two. The next one, he says here that self care particularly links to loneliness, behavioral problems, and negative academic outcomes. Okay. Latchkey children refers to children who routinely return home from school to empty homes and take care of themselves for extended periods of time. Although self care generally points to negative outcomes, it is important to consider that the bulk of research has yet to track long term consequences. In research and practice, the phrase children in self care has come to replace latchkey in an effort to more accurately reflect the nature of their circumstances. Although parents might believe that self care should be beneficial for development, recent research has found quite the opposite. Now, let's see what he's talking about. He has particularly talked about the self care and the latchkey children, the children in self care, and what parents, you see, believe about self care and so forth. So in number sentence number one, two, four, and five, we have got the same kind of what you call theme idea. The one that is out is number three, which is a general statement. You see that self care generally points to negative outcomes and then the long term consequences. So this is something out of what you call the order. So number three is the sentence there. So that is the correct answer. Now let's look at the jumbled sentences here. So now let's look at the sentences here. Suppose we were to start the sentence with like the ants that make up a colony, no single neuron holds complex information like self-awareness, hope, or pride. Okay, that was the first sentence. Then the problem is we can't put the other sentences after this because you are beginning it with like the ants that make up a colony. The others, you see, don't match. Okay, then let's let the second sentence. Although the human brain is not yet understood enough to identify the mechanism by which emergence functions, most neurobiologists agree that complex interconnections among the parts give rise to qualities that belong only to the whole. Nonetheless, you can't begin the sentence with nonetheless. And the last one, human consciousness is often called an emergent property of the human brain. Now, that is a general statement, so we can begin with number four. The next would be number one, because see what's like the ants that make up a colony, no single neuron complex information like self-awareness, hope, or pride. Because self-awareness refers to human consciousness. And then he talks about nonetheless, the sum of all neurons in the nervous system generate complex human emotions. So number three, and then finally number two. 4132. Now let's look at the next one. Um, Again, we go for a general statement. Western Christian concepts tend to deny or feign ignorance about the existence of a genuine and enduring indigenous African tradition. That is a general statement. So we can have four as one, as the first sentence. Number four as the first sentence. Concepts, concepts, that is the key word, tend to deny or feign ignorance. Okay. However, their views contradict the reality. For a rich and sustaining local African cultural ethos exists for all who care to see and experience. So, their views, you see, refers to the Western Christian concepts. So you have four and then three, and then after three, you have number two. Chukwumeka Aiki explores the conflict and casts the Western tradition as a condensing, enveloping, and unaccommodating towards local African practice. So that you have in number 2. Why did I take up number 2? Because this is the conflict, you see, that this man Ike explores, you see, the conflict that is generated. That is, their views contradict the reality for a rich and sustaining local Afro-cultural ethos, which is stated in number 3. And then number last one is contemporary African writing like the bottle leopard voices this theme using two children and two backgrounds to juxtapose the varying two varying cultures. So you have 4, 3, and 2, 1. That is the correct sequence. Now let's come to the next exercise. In this exercise, you have a passage and they are followed, it's followed by 4 alternate summaries. You have to choose the option that best captures the essence of the passage. Now, in such passages, what you should do is you must try to read the entire passage and see for yourself what is the passage is about. What is the main point in the passage? Now, in this passage, you can see for yourself, he's talking about heat waves, and heat waves, you see, they actually create risk for people. You see, heat waves, you see, they actually create, they are risky. And if you go through the passage, the impacts of extreme heat are unevenly experienced with older people, young children, those with pre-existing medical conditions, and on low incomes, vulnerable. You can see the risk involved. Adaptation to heat waves is a significant public policy concern. Research conducted among at-risk people in the UK reveals that even vulnerable people do not perceive themselves as at risk of extreme heat. Therefore, early warnings of extreme heat events do not perform as intended. This suggests that understanding how extreme heat is narrated is very important. The news media plays a central role in this process and can help warn people about the potential danger as well as about the impacts on the infrastructure and society. Now, the point is, I mean, if you look at, well, read the passage closely, you can see for yourself there are two things. One is the heat waves, its impact, you see, the risk, and the role of the media. The media has to play, the part the media has to play in alerting people against this danger, you see. So these are the 2 points, and let me see which of these summaries carries these 2 points. News stories help in warning about heat waves, but they have to become more effective. Now, that is a very lame way of saying things. Okay. Heat waves pose an enormous risk. The media plays a pivotal role in alerting people to this danger. Now, that is well said. And I think that is a very good summary. Number 2 should be the answer. People are vulnerable to heat waves caused due to climate change. Measures taken are ineffective. Now, in this, he states only one point. The point about the media, you see, is missing here. And the point about the risk involved is missing here. Protection from heat waves is important, but current reports and public policies seem effective. Now, that is a very general statement. It rather trivializes, you see, the entire point about the heat wave. So, number 2 is the correct answer. Now, let's look into the next question. And in this, you can see for yourself, he says people simultaneously create counterfactual alternatives to reality when they think, if only or what if, and imagine how the past could have been different. The mind computes counterfactuals for many reasons. Counterfactuals explains the past and prepare for the future. They implicate various relations, including causal ones, and they affect intentions and decisions. They modulate emotions such as regret and relief. They support moral judgment such as blame. The ability to create counterfactuals develops throughout childhood and contributes to reasoning about other people's beliefs, including their false beliefs. I read out the entire passage because look how detailed you see the passage is about the counterfactuals. Now, let us see which one of these summaries is the best one. Counterfactual thinking helps to reverse past and future actions and reason out false beliefs. Now, that is not correct, you see. It's actually, you see, simplifying something very erroneously. Number 2, people create counterfactual alternatives to realities for various reasons, including reasoning about other people's belief. I don't think that's a very good summary. They might create, you see, counterfactual alternatives to realities for various reasons, right? but then including reasoning about other people's beliefs. Is that it? I don't think the passage is very sure about it or clear about it. Counterfactuals help people to prepare for the future by understanding intentions and making decisions. No, that is cutting down on the counterfactuals. You see, just it's only related to the future, and you see the intentions and decisions. Counterfactual alternatives to reality are created for a variety of reasons. Yes, that's in the passage, and is part of one's development process. Yes, it's a part of the process. It develops throughout childhood and contributes to reasoning about other people's beliefs, including their false beliefs. So, number two would have been correct, you see, would have been exhaustive had it taken into the point about the development factor, but it doesn't. So, we can't have number two there. So, number four is the best option. Number four is the best summary you have there.